Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this presentation of the Renault financial results. And thanks and welcome to all of you listening to us on video, online, or indeed on our hashtag link. There is, as usual, the disclaimer prior to the presentation, especially as regards forecasts and provisional data. So that's the disclaimer. We have a three-part presentation this morning. Mrs. Delbos, our CFO, will present, of course, the financial performance for 2018. Mr. Bolloré, who is our CEO, will present the outlook for 2019 and, of course, the lessons from 2018. And Mrs. Delbos has the floor now.
Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce the results of Renault Group. In spite of what was a challenging environment, especially in H2, our group was managed to meet all its targets, and operating profit was at a high level. Revenue, 57.4 billion, is slightly down 2.3%. It would have been up 2.5% on a constant exchange rate basis. Operating margin is 6.3% of revenue, would have been 6.5% had it not been for IFRS 15 accounting standards, and free cash flow automotive stood at 607 million euros. Now, before going into the details of the financial performance, a few words about our sales performance as was presented on 18 January. Sales were up 3.2% to 3.9 million units, including the sales from Jinbei and Huasong, 166,000 units. Looking at the 2017 scope, sales were down 1.2%, whereas TIV was down 0.3%. Let's look at the different regions. In Europe, group as a whole had a 0.5% growth, slightly better than the TIV, which was stable in 2018 compared to 2017. In Eurasia, sales including Lada were up 2%, whereas the market was down 2%, and that is thanks to a good performance in Russia and Romania, which was able to offset at least partly the downturn in Turkey. In Africa, Middle East, India, sales were down 15.8%, essentially due to the termination of the Iranian market, and of course, waiting for the renewal of the product line in a very contested market. And in India and in the Americas, sales were up 12.1% in spite of the decline in Argentina, thanks to quid in the region. And finally, Asia-Pacific had a 68.3% increase in sales, including Jinbei and Huasong. Had it not been for these brands, we would have been down 15.4% because of slower sales in China and South Korea. Now, revenue for the group was 57.4 billion euro, down 2.3% compared to 2017. Revenue, automotive revenue, not including after-hours, was down 4.4% compared to 2017. 51.2 billion. This was also due to the new accounting standard, IFRS 15, which meant that 555 million euros of revenue were transferred from the automotive division to sales financing, that is RCI. Without that, the change in automotive would have been minus 3.4% instead of minus 4.3%. But you can see that the downturn was worse in H2 than H1. This was because there were fewer sales to partners, but also a challenging economic and geopolitical situation in a number of key markets outside Europe. We were able to offset partly these effects with higher prices. If you look at after-hours, not including eliminations, or net of elimination, was up 11.1%. Our captive bank, RCI, was up 27.7% to 3.2 billion euros, and this includes this 555 million euros revenue that I just mentioned. Had it not been for that, the revenue would have been up 5.6% at RCI. Let's look at the variations in revenue. Forex had the most significant effect, upwards of 2.2 billion euros. The Argentinian peso accounts for half of that factor, of that effect. And another quarter is due to the Brazilian real and the Turkish lira. The second negative impact is lower sales to partners to the tune of 946 million euros because of lower sales of diesel cars in Europe. And as I said, the closure of the Iranian markets. Volume effect was negative to the tune of 250 million euros, mostly because of lower demand in Argentina and Turkey in H2, whereas our sales in Europe were up 0.5% over the year. Now, the model mix had a negative effect of 140 million euros because of Kwid's success in the Americas, because the average price of that is less than the price of Kwid is less than average of units in group, and also lower sales in the C and D segments and the smaller portion of diesel cars. On the positive side, we have price increases in emerging markets to compensate for currency effects, but also in Europe to absorb regulatory costs. So that generated a positive price effect, 742 million euros. And others, you have 439 million euros, apart from the 555 million euros from RCI. Most of the performance is due to second-hand used cars and spare parts. Now, operating profit, it was 3.6 billion euros, operating margin being 6.3% compared with 6.6% in 27. Were it not for IFRS 15, it would have been 6.5%. Automotive operating profit, excluding AvtoVAZ, was down 19.8%, 2.2 billion euros, 4.3% of revenue. AvtoVAZ's contribution to operating profit was 204 million euros, a third of it being due to one-offs. But even leaving that out, this significant improvement in AvtoVAZ's contribution shows a clear step in the right direction. 2018 was a record year for RCI Bank because, of course, was able to generate more business and was able to keep its costs under control. And so RCI Bank contributes to the tune of 1.2 billion euros to the group profit, up 14.7%. Let's look at the details of that. Starting on the left-hand side, lower costs contributed 362 million euros, including 421 million of Monozukuri savings, good purchasing performance, and a higher capitalization of R&D in 2018 than in 2017. Raw materials, especially steel, other metals, and oil products, had a negative impact to 356 million euros. And as you saw in revenue, higher prices in emerging countries partly offset lower currencies, and in Europe that covered partly regulatory costs, and you have a positive effect in the enrichment mix price, up 261 million euros in spite of the negative effect of lower diesel engine sales. The volume and partner had a negative impact, 329 million euros, mostly lower volumes and lower sales to partners. RCI Bank and other activities generated a positive factor of 243 million euros because of high profitability of RCI and good performance of sales of accessories and used cars. Currency effects was negative 572 million euros, mostly due to the Argentinian peso. Finally, AvtoVAZ's contribution was up 149 million euros in 2018. Now, as I said, there are some one-off positive effects there, but not including that. AvtoVAZ's operating profit would have been 4%, which shows that AvtoVAZ is definitely on the path to recovery. All in all, operating profit for the group stood at 3.6 billion euros. Let's look at other income and expenditure. You have here a negative factor of 625 million euros compared with 48 million last year. There are two factors because of to explain that: the Argentinian crisis, which led to asset write-down to the tune of 200 million euros, and then costs of about 300 million euros, mostly for early retirement plans in France. If we look at our income statement, P&L, let's look at the financial expense. We can see that This was there was a slight improvement there because of a lower cost of debt and a lower average debt. Let's look at companies on the equity basis, mostly Nissan. The contribution was 1.5 billion compared with 2.8 billion last year. Nissan's contribution was down, therefore, 1.3 billion euros. In 2017, the contribution included 1 billion euros in non-recurrent effects because of the tax reform in the US, but also there was capital gains on the disposal of their stake in Calsonic Kansai. And in slide 13, we can see that tax was 723 million euros, which is more or less the same tax rate as 2017. Net profit after tax stood at 3.45 billion euros. Having been through the analysis of the income statement, let's take a look at the cash position. Cash flows stood at 4.4 billion euros compared with 4.3 billion in 2017. That's because of a lower operating profit. Change in WCR had a positive effect, 0.8 billion euros, and that highlights the efforts made to better manage WCR. Net investment was up 0.8 billion compared with 2017 because of a higher R&D investment. We've also invested in capex for our new products in our plants and to improve our the generation of new engines. Including AvtoVAZ's 115 million euros in cash flow, operating free cash flow for the automotive sectors was 607 million euros. You have the dividends, minus 280 million euros. Financial investment was about 290 million euros. There was mostly acquisitions in China and also funding the Alliance Capital Venture Fund. AvtoVAZ's recapitalization generated positive effect, 454 million euros. All in all, the automotive cash position, including AvtoVAZ, was at 0.5 billion euros, reaching 3.7 billion euros. This presentation is now completed, and I'll now give the floor to our CEO, Thierry Bolloré, who will present the main achievements in 2018 and the outlook for 2019.
Merci Clotilde.
Thank you, Clotilde, and a very big hello and welcome to all of you for the presentation of our results for 2018. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the main achievements of the Renault Group before I go on to our outlook for 2019. And course is really very clearly set. We need to achieve the objectives of our strategic Drive the Future plan. In 2018, as you've seen, we had to face several headwinds. Some of these were expected, others were not. And when we had to face these headwinds, Renault has actually shown an exceptional resilience. As you've just heard from our CFO, these financial and sales results clearly show that the Renault Group is learning to adapt. And also one fact can sum this up, which is that we were profitable in every single region of the globe. We also had record sales, almost managed to maintain our operating margin and with positive free cash flow. This performance was achieved in spite of a very unfavorable environment, especially in the second half of 2018. We had to, of course, face the unexpected collapse of certain markets, especially in Turkey and Argentina, as well as the stopping of our activities in Iran. And we also were impacted by the increase of the price of raw materials and very unfavorable exchange rates. And the exchange rates actually penalized our revenue by about 2.2 billion euros. That's 4.1 points. And just like the rest of the European market, we had to adjust as best we could to WLTP. We also had anticipated the change in the energy mix, but that accelerated during the financial year. And with the slight shift, we were, however, able to adapt to the reduction of diesel engines and the stronger demand for petrol engines. Now, just to give you a very objective and quantitative figure for the impact of these negative events on our results, we calculated that our performance in 2018 without these difficult conditions would have actually cost us 3.6 billion euros in our revenue and 1 point of operating margin. However, we did increase our sales and our market shares as well as our profitability, and this means that we can propose that the dividend should be maintained at 3.55 euros per action, of course, subject to the approval of this by the next AGM. Now let's take a look at other successes that fed our growth and our resilience in 2018. First of all, our strength comes from our products. In Europe, we were able to maintain our leadership on the B segment thanks to the continuing success of Clio, Captur and Sandero, and Clio is still the second biggest selling vehicle on the market, and Captur is the leading crossover in its category. Now, Dacia had a new record of sales in Europe with more than 500,000 cars sold and a record market share of 2.9%. This is basically due to the success of the new Duster that was launched at the end of 2017. Our growth was also confirmed beyond Europe. In South America, we were able to adapt the Quid to the market needs with great success, and after more than a year after the launch, Quid is number one in its segment in Brazil and Argentina, and this has made it possible for us to increase our market share by 1 point in these two countries. Brazil, we now stand at 8.7%, and Argentina 14.8% market share. In Russia, just 2 years after the launch of its recovery plan, AvtoVAZ has confirmed its leadership. And thanks to the renewal of its range, AvtoVAZ has recorded sales which are at a record level of 15.6% and achieved 20% market share. And the Lada Vesta has become the bestseller on the Russian market. And AvtoVAZ marked an operating margin of 6.7%, of course with non-recurrent positive elements, but still this confirms its recovery. And as far as the electric vehicle is concerned, Renault has affirmed its European leadership with a market share of 22.2%, and EV sales for the Renault brand in the world were up 37% over the year. Zoe's volumes were increased by 27% and Kangoo's by 106%. EV today represents more than 3% of our revenue, and the profitability of EVs have clearly improved thanks to economies of scale that are linked to the growth of our volumes and also the efforts we've made to reduce costs. And so EVs are now a new lever of growth over the next few years. And in 2018, we made huge investments in order to extend our production capacity in France and to develop the third generation of electric models. So thanks to the diversification of our profit sources as well as the diversity of our geographical regions, Renault has been able to show its resilience in 2018. Our strict discipline for costs has also largely contributed to this performance. We were able to reap the fruits of our continuous efforts to improve our competitiveness. In 2018, we made more than 250 million euros of savings and productivity, and we achieved 77 vehicles produced per employee in our plants. Compared to 2017, that's an increase of 7%. So in 2022, our aim is to go beyond 100 vehicles produced by employee in our plants, and 5 of our vehicle plants have already achieved or gone beyond this target. And in 2018 was of course a year for synergies to be generated by the alliance, and that was 2.4 billion euros for Renault. Now let's take a look at the outlook for 2019. Of course, it's going to be a year of moderate growth, and it's going to be in line, however, with our objectives for the Drive the Future plan. And we are going to pilot Renault with a new and reinforced governance with the arrival of Jean-Dominique Sénard as the chairman of the board. Now, before I go on to the risks and opportunities, we have to keep in mind the comparison between the first half of 2019 and 2018 H1 is going to be difficult because we had some really good sales in the first half of 2018. So we do have 3 major risks for 2019. The first uncertainty is European demand, and we believe that, of course, the economic growth may slow, and Brexit could also impact sales in 2019. Secondly, the implementation of new environment regulations. We are prepared, of course, for the regulatory framework as it was announced, and we have a very clear roadmap and a robust action plan. However, these new regulations are so complex that there are certain uncertainties, especially the absence of visibility concerning tax incentives. Now, the last major risk is the increase of costs, especially with certain raw materials like palladium, and in certain countries with high inflation, we think that there's going to be a problem with the cost of labor. Of course, as far as opportunities are concerned, we have a very strong product plan for 2019. We are going to speed up our launches. The new Clio and Arcana should contribute to our growth. And in India, we're preparing the launch of a new vehicle, which should help us. In China, we have, it's going to help us with growth because we are launching the new electric vehicle KZ this year. And we're also continuing our offensive in EVs. We're investing in JMEV, which is the 5th biggest Chinese EV maker. And another opportunity is our price policy. The group will continue to push through the prices of overcosts linked to regulations and the enrichment in our products. And this should be made easier by a converging environment because all of the main European players will be in the same situation. We are improving our flexibility in our pricing policy. We've set up a new organization. At the end of 2018, we separated out marketing and sales. And lastly, we are reinforcing our competitiveness in terms of costs beyond the contribution of the alliance. We've just launched our new FAST program, which is going to help us improve our performance, and it's going to help us accelerate and deepen the transformation of the Renault Group. We expect this to give us 3 main significant gains for performance and efficiency. First of all, we're going to reduce our development cycles to 3 years maximum in order to be as close as possible to the expectations of our customers and, of course, to optimize our R&D resources. The second saving is going to be that we will improve our responsiveness and our efficiency by accelerating our digital transformation and having more agile functioning methods. Third saving is that we're going to reduce our fixed cost by 5% per year for 3 years. For 2019, we think that the worldwide market is going to be stable compared to 2018. The European market should also remain stable, of course, if we don't have a hard Brexit. The Russian market should grow by at least 3% and the Brazilian one by 10%. In this context, the Renault Group's objectives are to increase its revenues at constant forex rates and scope, to ensure that our operating margin is at about 6% and to generate positive operating free cash flow in the automotive branch. Ladies and gentlemen, as you will have understood, in these conditions, we confirm the objectives of our strategic plan Drive the Future, and by the end of the plan, we will go over 70 billion euros of revenue and for an operating margin of at least 7%. We will achieve this while still keeping our financial discipline. We will give ourselves the objective of generating a positive free cash flow every year, which will be fed by our cost reductions fixed at 4.2 billion euros between now and the end of the plan. Thank you for your attention. We can take your questions now.
And now, for the Q&A session, please introduce yourselves and one question at a time, please, so that we can have as many questions as possible. We'll start here. The microphone is on its way. Alain Gabriel from Challengers. I had a couple of questions, so only one, because of one question only. You said that all regions are profitable, but are all models, business models, profitable around the world? The answer is not yet. Some models are haven't reached profitability, but all models are improving, though.
Bonjour, Anya Nussbaum de.
My name is Anya Nussbaum from Bloomberg. You said to the analysts that making the alliance not reversible was still part of your objective. So what are you going to do to achieve that target, and how are you going to drive down your participation in Nissan? I think, says Thierry Bolloré, the alliance is one of our most precious goods and has been over the last few years. We've done all we could to make it completely operational and to deliver the synergy. So for us, we need more alliance, a better alliance, an alliance that is as quick and agile and fluid as possible. That's what we're interested in. That's what we're working towards. Of course, we want a maximum amount of synergies, but speed of execution, speed of decisions is going to be key for the automotive market, which is changing so much. And here the landscape is changing. Of course, we're going to see what we can do. We can adapt the alliance to face these new challenges that automotive makers have to face. David?
Bonjour, une question en anglais, si je peux.
Please,
Pardon.
John.
It's about the Alliance again. It's simply that, is the plan to make 2/3 of Alliance cars on 4 shared platforms by 2022 still on track? And when are we likely to see Renault products produced on Nissan platforms and vice versa?
Well, what I can tell you is that, je réponds en français ou en anglais?
I have to answer in English, and what I can tell you is that all the programs that we have now, with a few exceptions, well, Alpine, we are already using Alliance platforms. So some platforms inevitably will be used by the companies for their own products, like for us with the Alpine. But what's happening now is being done on joint platforms, common platforms. Leo.
Leo Klems,
Leo Klems from Deutsche Zeit. Mr. Bolloré, you haven't mentioned your earlier CEO, Mr. Ghosn. I noted that you didn't thank him either today, so I'd like to know. You worked hand in hand with him for a long time, and do you miss him, and does the company miss him? Mr. Bolloré, I think the best tribute we could pay to our former CEO is our results. And it is our determination to carry out the midterm plan, drive the future plan, and to ensure that the alliance cannot be reversed. That is the best tribute we can pay to him. That's what we're trying to do with the management team.
Angel Calvo de l'agence CFE.
I'm from the LCV agency. Can you explain the situation of depreciation in Argentina and the outlook? You mean the currency? Well, you know the situation of Argentina, don't you? From a macroeconomic viewpoint, well, you have depreciation of the currency, you have hyperinflation, and our perception of the Argentinian market now, and it has basically collapsed in 2018. We don't see any improvement in 2019. We have no reason to believe that the situation will improve at all. So we're working on that assumption for 2019. I hope that answers your question.
Ici.
Antoine Larigauderie, BFM.
Antoine Larigauderie from BFM Business. I'd like to know, would you have anything to tell us, maybe concerning the evolution of the changes in the demand for diesel engines this year and how you can adapt your range? Mr. Bolloré, well, we've been planning for this for many years now. And of course, what happened was in 2015 and 2016, there was a considerable reduction in demand. And what we also we're interested in is to see that our customers are continuing to want more petrol engines than in the past. So for many years, we've tried to ensure that our production lines were even more flexible than before. That's why we were able to satisfy the demand for petrol engines among our customers. So we are renewing our engine range, as you know, because today it's very, very competitive, especially our petrol engines. And it's true that we have cut down on our engine diversity, especially diesel engines. We've kept the minimum number, and especially now for the Euro 7 standards, we will have very few diesel engines just to fulfill the needs of the market for LCVs, for example.
Franck
Boisy from Libération. Sorry, I didn't see you, says Mr. Bolloré. Yes. Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned a new style of new governance for the company. Can you give us any details about the people and the methods? Well, new governance, well, we have separated out the chairman of the board from the CEO, from the person in charge of operations. So you have a clear separation of labor. I'm in charge of operations, the business of the company, and of course it is for me to work with my alliance partners. And Jean-Dominique Senard drives the board with his own specific mission. Any other changes? The answer is no. I mean, you can see that we are now in marching order, and
Togo Siré Shinike.
Yes, Togo Sarashinike. Could you say something about the objective of Mr. Jean-Dominique Sénard's visit to Japan, and could you tell us whether you think he should also be the chairman of Nissan? Mr. Bolloré. Now, to continue along the same lines as the previous question, the great thing about this governance team is that Jean-Dominique Sénard and I make a perfect team. And the reason why he's going to Japan is part of the onboarding program that we've set up for Mr. Sénard to ensure he gets to know about Renault and the Alliance. So I took him 2 weeks ago to Amsterdam so that he could meet the largest number of people possible from Renault and Nissan and the Alliance, so he could understand exactly what the reality was like out there on the field. And his trip to Japan is simply the continuation of this onboarding process, so that he can get to know all of our partners, talk to them, meet the main people, the main management of Nissan, of course, and to get to know how this works. And then it'll make it easier for us to have fruitful discussions. That's the aim. Well, of course, as you saw, we have some, of course, as you know, we have some positions on Nissan's board, and it's quite normal that we should be able to occupy them. So we should occupy them, and then we'll see who the Nissan board votes for.
Julien Marion from Jones, you said that the alliance is there to meet the automotive challenge. Is that a capitalistic industrial alliance? Well, we have to open up the scope of the alliance. Of course, the bottom line is we want to have operations adapted to the changes in the automotive environment. But the reason we're building the alliance is to make sure the operations work smoothly. Now, there are various ways of doing this, but it's maybe early days now.
Bonjour, Jun Nagata, journaliste de l'agence Kyodo, la presse japonaise.
Hello, I'm from the Japanese press. Since you are now the CEO of Renault Nissan BV, I'd like to know how far has the internal investigation gone that you're carrying out with Nissan? We heard about the 15th anniversary of the alliance, the party to celebrate that and all that. So, Mr. Bolloré, we've decided to carry out a certain number of compliance investigations within the Renault Group. So they are ongoing. Most of them are actually over. And for Renault, this led to one report, as you know, what happened in Versailles. Now, as far as the audit is concerned, the one that's being carried out between Renault for RNBV, we're going to let people do their job. It's going to take a few weeks, maybe a few months, for us to get the full results of this investigation. And then we will know whether or not there was any irregularity within RNBV.
Julia Dubon-Calvo from Les Echos. You mentioned the financial objectives in the strategic plan. Are you going to find a new ways of getting there, or are you sticking to the plan? Well, the strategic plan, we designed it, we produced it with our colleagues from the Alliance, because remember that the part of that strategic plan is based on joint activities conducted with the Alliance. So there's no reason to change the strategic plan. So sure enough, we're adapting to the environment, but based on the information that we have no reason to question the plan or to change it in any way. So we're going to stick to it all the way to 2022. Now, obviously, we have to adapt to circumstances. When the Iranian market came to ground to a halt, well, then we had to compensate with other initiatives and other opportunities, and that is, well, unexpected developments, at least you could say. When we laid the plan out, we didn't have such expectations. No, when we wrote the plan, we allowed for room for maneuver in terms of volume, so we can use that, but we're not changing the course. We're staying the course.
Christian Demer from the German press agency. I have a question also on Mr. Ghosn, if you don't mind. We had two communiques, two press releases concerning Mr. Ghosn. I'm not going to repeat that, but could you maybe give us an idea about what sort of link is your group going to keep with Mr. Ghosn? Is he still going to be given a job? Are there any other payments that are scheduled or that are possible apart from the amount that was mentioned in the press release yesterday? And Mr. Ghosn is going to turn 65 very quickly. Is he going to be paid retirement pensions? Well, all the elements that you've quoted come under the responsibility of the board of directors. And secondly, I'm not going to repeat what you saw yesterday. You've seen the decisions taken by the board, given the rules. And that's the first element. The second, the second thing is that the board has given itself some time to finalize its answer to all these elements and will take its decision during the next meeting, which is going to take place in March of this year. And that should give us a total visibility about what the board decides on concerning Mr. Ghosn.
My name is Samuel Petruquin, and about the alliance, what is your idea? I mean, do you believe that Nissan should have more weight in the relation because it's more profitable, it's generating more profit than Renault? Well, I saw that in the media, but from the inside, it's a bit odd to consider the relative weight of partners, because the very concept of the alliance with these partners is that we respect individual identities, individual companies. And if you look, well, in the interest of all these companies, we have to work in a very equitable way, in a fair way, irrespective of the financial or economic weight of the different partners. And my experience of the alliance is that we have to be, in as much as possible, all of us should be in good health. The alliance works better if we're healthy than if we're not, because if a partner is encountering financial or economic difficulties, that of course, irrespective of size, that is not good news. But then the other thing is that we want to cooperate, pool what we can, join forces in as much as we can, and take and leverage each other's strengths. When Mitsubishi came into the alliance, we found exciting things with them. And I'm looking at Véronique because in purchases, they had a big plus. I mean, we thought because they were small, they stood to gain most from the clout of the alliance. But we found at Mitsubishi very exciting practices that were very, very worthwhile, both for Nissan and Renault. So, look at digital. Never mind who starts. What it is, in fact, desirable to have somebody starting the ball rolling, see what works, what doesn't work, and then it's easier to follow suit. So it's more like somebody starts an initiative and others follow through, and that's what gets the alliance going. Now, if you look at the changes that we want to make in the company, we have to do this in an agile way, and that's what the FAST plan is all about. So when decisions can be made on the spot without having to refer back to top management, things work better. Having said that, we do this in a very systematic and organized way, and it does work. We have excellent examples in the organization, and we've seen this at Renault. But I'll tell you quite plainly, we'll do it with our friends from the Alliance. And our Japanese friends can spot immediately what works and what doesn't work. And they recognize something that works when they see it. And when it does work, they're very good at adopting it and making it happen, more so than us in a way. So that's really how we work at the Alliance.
Oui, Florence. Florence, juste là.
Yes, Florence. Yes, I have 3 questions because that way I can give up the microphone without any regrets. On what you've just said about the alliance, do we understand that what I had understood recently was that we were moving towards more rigidity, almost forced pooling of things. And what you're saying is that, are you saying that we're coming back to a more flexible and more agile version of the alliance? And then for WLTP, you didn't tell us what the impact of WLTP was in your costs. So if it's not in your operating margin, can you tell us maybe what was the cost? What are the costs of that you've passed on in your cars in Europe? And is your aim still 5 million vehicles? Well, I'll take your last question first, says Mr. Bolloré. Yes, it's still 5 million vehicles. WLTP, of course, did have an impact on our costs and meant that we had to spend a lot of money on R&D. And that's true of all regulations, not just WLTP, which came around at the end of last year. Now, it all depends on what kind of technology we use, but, it's about 100 euros and what's per car. But what's much more important than that is all the improvement that we were able to make in our whole portfolio of engines and powertrains for customer experience, not just the performance that Philippe Brunet could tell us about because he was leading that, but customer experience that is associated with that, which means that most of the cost goes into the price of the car because we also add a lot of value to our cars. And your first question concerned the alliance, whether it's agile or not. Yes. So maybe I wasn't clear enough in what I said. It's true that the FAST program is going to transform the Renault Group. And obviously, that also concerns the alliance, because when we say that we want to, say, reduce we want to reduce our development cycle for our products to just 3 years. And the people who are working on these challenges are alliance teams. Of course, there are Renault projects and Renault teams, but these are on alliance platforms. So the teams are also alliance teams. So even if the initiative comes from Renault, we're actually doing this directly with the alliance teams. So that is the dynamic that I want to introduce, and that's really important. And Faiz from Les Echos. So I wanted to know, what about the profitability of electric vehicles? Is it still very far from the average profitability of the group? Is it going to bring down your margins, etc.? Well, what I can say is that the profitability of electric vehicles is going up very quickly because volumes are going up quickly. We have cost reduction programs also on these vehicles that have now become very efficient. And also, we have no problems pushing volumes because there is a demand. And, we're not going to not answer this demand thinking to ourselves, oh, my God, are we going to bring down the average profitability of the vehicle, of the company, sorry. I'm not saying that EVs are at the same level as our average, but some of them are really, really good. So we need to sell them, and we're going to continue to sell them for EVs as well. And the Zoe, yes, is the biggest seller. I didn't say it was the most profitable, though. It is the biggest seller.
Hakim, and then the next one. Hello, my name is Hakim. Where are you, Hakim? Sorry, I couldn't see you. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Number one, are you concerned about slower sales in China? Because you have a big presence. Nissan is very much present in China and the US, and lower sales both in China and in America with higher raw materials and depreciation of currencies. Are you concerned about that? You mean China? Well, China, but the other countries as well. Well, we Renault are so small in China that if there are negative movements in the market in like last year or earlier this year, of course we can feel it, but our ambitions in terms of market shares, we're starting from such a low point that we're not facing the same sort of headwind as when you're bigger on a market that is being shaken. Now, our position in China has several dimensions. For the Renault products, we have the DRAC plan. We have 2 products already, and these products are adapted to the Chinese markets, and we can take this market by surprise. Now, for the LCVs, we have a new joint venture there with Brilliance. Now, that company was experiencing some challenges earlier on. It's being set back on track, but it shows great potential in LCVs, and so we're setting some LCVs upright, as it were. Some new cars with the Jinbei brand, and our own LCV models with brilliance. Now, regarding the electric car, we have a joint venture again with Nissan and Dongfeng, which means that we can have an ultra-modern electric and affordable electric car. And that equation we haven't got in China yet. And that's starting only now. In other words, we'll be rolling them out in 2019. And the fourth initiative, still in electric cars, because we're trying to reach out, expand on a highly and fast-growing market. And there we are about to acquire the 5th largest Chinese player in electric cars. So we have a multifaceted strategy focused on electric cars, Renault brands, and LCVs. And there's a question about the effects of the price of raw materials and currencies on our cars. Well, we can feel the heat, as it were. The real issue is, can we pass on the price or the cost to the consumer? That's something that happens regularly, and we manage to do it more and more. That is to pass on the cost of these higher costs of raw materials or the currency effects, pass them on to the customer in terms of prices, and that's what we try and do. And in fact, our pricing power enables us to do just that and get the right value for our products and our brands. Tania? Hello, I would like to a follow-up on what you said. Some initiatives could be started by one of the partners in the alliance, and others can follow suit. Hang on, I was talking about products in terms of competitiveness, not like new cars or new platforms. That's something else. So no, says Mr. Bolloré. The business part, that is pooling our platforms, modules, electronic architectures, everything that is inside the car, while you can still differentiate between brands. Well, that we're doing all the time. But we see what we have in common, the use of joint platforms. I mean, that's the way we generate synergies, and so we do just that. But I'm talking about project in terms of running companies, or in the way the alliance works, and the new initiatives that can improve the way the alliance works as a whole. It's not one or another company. That's the sort of thing. Yes, but it says the American SEC is looking at the compensation packages of Nissan leaders. Did the SEC look at Renault, or the French equivalent? Did they look at Renault? Well, SEC is only for Nissan, so Renault is not in touch with AMF. No, hang on. Of course, the AMF, the French, authority, of course, but not. And we didn't wait for them to knock on our door to report all items to do with compliance, so that we should be perfectly clear about this, especially as the accounts are about to be signed off. But the AMF didn't start an investigation on the compensation packages of Renault leaders.
So actually, we took the initiative to ensure that we were very compliant, which is the case. Yes, we have a question here. Antoine Landreau from AGFI Quotidien. Nissan explained at the end of last year that there was no Renault representative to replace Carlos Ghosn on their board. So today we believe that Jean-Dominique Sénard obviously would sit on the Nissan board. So today, can you tell us how many representatives does Renault really have on Nissan's board, keeping in mind that Renault owns more than 40% of the capital of Nissan? Yes, of course, says Mr. Bolloré. We have 3 representatives on the board of Nissan. And so obviously it's one of these seats that Mr. Sénard is going to occupy if the board decided to go down that path, the board of Nissan decided to go down that path. My name is Gilles Guillaume. I want to come back to EVs. Emmanuel Macron yesterday announced a European project to make batteries. So is the Renault Group plan to play any role in this thing that's been called the European batteries Airbus? And also for EVs, the emergence of this new this new sourcing talks about these for example, metals that come from certain African countries that are at war. So do you think that there's an ethical way to do this? Mr. Bolloré. So we've always been very, very clear vis-à-vis all the authorities to say that we would always support any kind of any idea that would ensure that either European or a French supply chain could be set up for batteries. So in Korea, we signed a strategic partnership with the battery supplier on innovation, and we've done that with other competitors as well because we don't have a single supplier, as you can imagine. So now partnerships with battery manufacturers, there's no problem at all. We are quite ready to sign with a European battery maker. That's the first element. The second element, now as far as our supplies is concerned, we are very, very careful to ensure that our suppliers, because obviously it's not us, it's our suppliers, and sometimes it's the suppliers of our suppliers. So we have to ensure that they respect our CSR rules, and to such an extent that we should not have a problem. So there's a certain monitoring that's done. There's a supervision that has been set up for all of our portfolio suppliers, not just with battery suppliers, to ensure that we don't suddenly discover something that we don't like. So, and lastly, and this is actually the most important thing, is that battery technologies are evolving very, very quickly. And everyone is looking to see what the new new generation of batteries could be. It might be solid-state batteries. And if that is so, they might eliminate the problems of supplies of very, very rare materials, which are obviously produced in countries where the risks are very high and they don't really chime with our CSR practices. So we have taken up participations in startups, for example, that are looking at a different technological approach. And that means that, I can't say in the long term or in the short term, it's sort of short, middle term. We should be able to take advantage of this kind of technology. Yes, Clément. Clément Lacombe from Nouvel Obs. Of all of the inquiries that is going on, you have the Bavresse-Ballon mission on the what was paid to the executive committee members of Renault. So we've heard about what happened in 2017, 2018. What happened before that? Well, we did actually communicate as this work started. We started with the more recent years, and for our ex-CEO, I think we went all the way back up to 2011. And as far as the executive committee is concerned, we went up to 2015. And so all of the successive reports were made to the board to ensure that everything was completely clear. And actually, we are compliant.
From the Asahi Shimbun Japanese daily newspaper. As you imagine that in Japan, we are the news about the future relationship between Nissan and Renault is a very high profile. And I'm just wondering what kind of discussion are you doing with Mr. Saikawa about the future of the alliance? And can you rule out the possibility of the merger between Renault and Nissan in the future, or are you still on the table as a possibility of the merger? Nissan and Renault.
Les discussions que j'ai avec...
Well, the talks I have with Mr. Saikawa are essentially of an operating nature, business, hands-on, and how to run the companies, and we are working with our teams to see how the alliance can work better, more efficiently, faster. And I mean, that's essentially what we discussed with Mr. Saikawa, because the environment is changing, and companies like the alliance have to adapt to this new deal and have the right and take the right momentum. So that's essentially what I discussed with Mr. Saikawa, Mr. Matsuko, saying these are the challenge. What do we do about it? That's the sort of talks we have. Now then, regarding issues of structure, what you're referring to, it's still too early to discuss this. But again, the structures are there to serve the operations better and not the other way around. But indeed, that's what discussions could lead to. We'll take the very last questions, this gentleman and this lady, and then a last gentleman.
Une question sur le Brexit, en fait. Donc, votre perspective sur le marché mondial.
Okay, so you think that the world markets are going to be stable apart from if there's a hard Brexit. What do you think? What do you think will happen if there is a hard Brexit, and how are you preparing for that possibility? Well, as you know, we have an exposure to the British market that is moderate in the case of a Brexit. We don't have a plant there, and so the vehicles that we sell there are actually imported onto British territory. Then I know the volumes, these are honourable. They're honourable volumes, but they're certainly not the biggest volumes we have in many countries. So in the case of a hard Brexit, the impact would not be a direct impact on us, but it would have an indirect impact. Because when you look at all of the simulations that we've done, a hard Brexit would really have an impact on the economy. Of course, on the British economy, but also on the economy of the whole of Europe. And very often it is the countries that are closest, geographically closest to the UK, where obviously where exchanges are the most intense. Those are the countries that will probably be hardest hit. But we think that indirectly in Europe, the automotive market is going to be hit as well. So we are doing our simulations as well. You know, we are preparing to see what happens if there is a hard Brexit, what will we do? So all the teams obviously are ready with their plans, contingency plans, although we are continuing to hope, obviously, that this is not what happens. Yes, we have one here. Sadia Braclia from Quotidien. I have one question concerning Carlos Ghosn. He was important in this house, in this corporate house. Have you got any news of Mr. Ghosn? We know what his detention conditions are like. Do you miss him, and do you thank him for all that he's done for Renault in 2018? Well, you know, frankly, all of the people who are sitting here, everyone in the alliance, all of these people, some of these people have worked for 20 years side by side with Mr. Ghosn. So 20 years of adventures, 20 years of growth of the alliance, which is such a singular, such a different kind of thing in the automotive industry. You know, obviously, so does that mean you miss him? Mr. Bolloré says, well, that's not really the question here. You know, we can see we were stunned. You can imagine that the whole company was stunned, and we were worried as well because, you know, the question was, how are we going to continue? But all the people here knew that it was our responsibility to carry on, no matter what our feelings were, because that's what you're referring to. You're referring to feelings. We knew that we had to carry on for our customers, for our employees, for the stakeholders in the company, and for the alliance. So our focus is not emotional. Our focus is really on continuing his work and ensuring that this work is durable and how it progresses. Did you get news of him? Well, of course, certainly. I ask for news of him very regularly. Okay, one last question here and then it'll be over. So I'm from Libération. Since this is the last question, I have a personal question. I'd like to know how you personally, as Thierry Bolloré, how have you experienced what's happened since the middle of November 2018, and what have you learned from this? Well, it was a huge shock. It was a huge shock for the whole company, for the whole of the alliance, and obviously even bigger of a shock for our friends in Nissan. So, you know, this was a huge change, and I think it's something that what is really important in all our companies is resilience. It's our capacity, because this event happened. Anything else could have happened. We could have, you know, something really serious that happened to any of us today. But actually, what is important is that the organization should carry on and should continue to do its work, and that the organization should continue to call on all the the skills and the expertise that it has so that its work can progress. Because that's what really counts. That is what our role vis-a-vis society. We are actually just relays. We have to keep preparing for our people to succeed us, and that's that is what the greatest managers do. And I'm asking everyone, what are your succession plans? Because you're there for a while, and then you have to just hand on the baton. And I think that's what you learn from this kind of event. And how do we become more resilient? How do we reinforce the emerging of talents and the capacity of the companies to survive any of us, to ensure that it continues to work in the societal role that it has, that is assigned to it? Yes? My name is Rina Ishii from the Japanese press, Fuji Television. We've been given a lot of information that tells us that the French government envisaged a merger between Nissan and...
Mais quels sont vos avis, franchement?
I'm sorry. It's too early really to talk about this. So that's why I don't want to go onto that field. This is the way our structure of the alliance can evolve. Because this is a context. So this is actually new. This is a new context. We're not new. Jean-Dominique Sénard is new. So he needs to get to know Renault. He needs to get to know Mitsubishi, Nissan, the alliance, because he has a very specific role to play, and that's good. We ask him to play this role of working on the possible evolution of our alliance. But your question is too premature. All of this will happen when it happens. Thank you very much. That's the end of this Q&A session. It's the end of our press conference. The press service is at your disposal. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to send them in. Thank you very much.